All right, so let's get into it here. Lincoln. So where's this one play out of?
Yeah, we're playing 2-5 at the Tampa Hard Rock. We are 1100 effective, eight-handed, full table.
Okay, that's again a place I have not been to. Tampa Hard Rock. What's the max buy-in?
It's a 1500 cap.
Oh, nice, nice little setup.
Yeah, so Hero has big blind. We have 10 of diamonds, 9 of diamonds. This is a heads up spot.
Okay.
Under the gun opens to 20. Younger reg. Don't have much history with him, but I believe I've seen him playing some 10-10. So, giving him reasonable pre-flop range, under the gun range. He opens to 20, folds to me in the big blind. I opt to just play a call here. I think against maybe a looser villain, maybe we can look for a three bet. It's kind of one of those cusp hands, but against an unknown at the gun range, call seems fairly standard here.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty tight open, right? If you don't know anything, I mean you could obviously this is a squeeze hand. Like if this comes from later position and then you got like a dead call in there, but heads up, I'm doing a lot of calling, and maybe I three bet heads up as it sort of trends towards the opener being in later position. So okay, so
Right.
heads up, like
I did have a question because
sure.
like Nate's charts, for example, his ranges, he has this hand, Jack 10 suited, Queen Jack suited, King Queen suited, all as partial three bets to an under the
Hmm.
gun open. Part of me thinks like, okay, simplify, let's just like play King Queen suited as a three bet, flat the rest. On the other hand, it's like, do we just use image and villain type to, maybe work that partial in? What's your thought on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've talked about this actually recently too. Whenever, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 podcasts ago, I was saying that, you always have extra information in live poker. So if I want to, I never really want to truly randomize. I mean,
Right.
if you were entirely against an unknown and you had absolutely no information, sure. But there's always usually more information in live play within a session, what your image is, who the opponent is, the game flow, things like that, that would just make me, it actually makes me want to use that type of information to influence a situation where something is a partial as opposed to, say, like totally randomizing a given spot.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. So we go to a flop 40 in the pot. We get Jack of diamonds, 10 of hearts, 5 of diamonds. So we get a middle pair and a
Yep.
flush draw.
Yeah, Jack of Diamonds, 10 of Hearts, 5 of Diamonds. So pretty good flop here for you. You flop a combo draw, but it is a combo draw where you have a pair. So these are a little bit different than, say, Queen 9 of Diamonds, right? Like King Queen of Diamonds, 8 9 of Diamonds, something like that where you have no showdown value unless you hit. Here, I will often take more of a passive line in a given situation depending on the board texture, because if your opponent doesn't have a pair, usually you have him quite crushed if he just has two overcards. Now here he might have two overcards and a gut shot, but still because you're covering diamonds.
Right. And yeah, being out of position too, check seemed fairly standard. So I go for the check. Villain bets 30, and I play a call here. Just use these Jack 10X boards. Can be a little scary, but I figured call seems fine, just given our equity and, middle pair. Obviously, we have a little bit of value too.
Yeah, I think I probably would have played this also too as a call. I mean, again, I don't even know if you're going to be getting the ace queen ace kings to necessarily fold off of a check raise, and you're ahead of everything else anyway. So if he's making like a pair bet or just like standard c bet, you really have the board covered quite a bit. So I would be mostly calling here too.
Right. So we got 100 in the pot. We go to a turn of the 9 of hearts. So double flush draw out there. We turn two pair.
Interesting. So you get two pair and diamonds. King queen comes in. So I mean, it's one of these things where, yeah, you have two pair and diamonds, but the more money, say, that would get in the pot, the more I wouldn't necessarily like this spot unless somebody was gonna say, bet off with, well, they can't really have, I mean, something like ace queen of diamonds, like you get it in with something, with a huge amount of equity, or something like that. So another sort of concept too, I know you said this guy is somewhat unknown to you, but you do sometimes want to play some stronger hands as check call so that people aren't so good players aren't able to just, value bet you to death if you're just check calling. Sometimes you have some strong hands. Now, there's going to be probably a fair amount of rivers that might come that might be a little bit tough to navigate too, but I think I would still probably plan on check calling here a fair amount.
That's what I do. Again, just being out of position. I think there's enough, diamond and like backdoor heart combos. He can keep barreling, and obviously we're ahead of a ton of all the draws, right? And then, so it just seemed like a spot to play a check call. So we do check. He pots it here for 100.
Interesting. So he pots it for 100. So UTG 100. You know, think about like, well, does that mean that like this is a necessarily like a polarized spot? I mean, in theory, hands like probably aces and kings shouldn't take a pot size here because I think that this is probably a better card for someone completing out of the blind versus somebody who's like a UTG type of open. So if you do decide to kind of check call, across this turn, even though I usually advocate at this level that a lot of times when you make a draw in sort of small stakes to mid stakes live play, you're really forced to lead when you hit your draw, which is a little bit of an unbalanced strategy because people check back so much. But when somebody starts to sort of polarize, or when you surmise that they're polarizing, then usually you just kind of play it across as kind of a bluff catching type of hand. So if I check call here again, and then the river brings in front door diamonds, if you don't think that he's betting like, ace jack or like kings, aces like this on this turn, you might check the river too. If you make front door diamonds and then evaluate whether you want to check raise or obviously just check call. If you make a boat with 9-10, you probably want to check raise at the end, right?
Right. So we do play call. I mean, I gave a raise some thought. I mean, the two pair, and then obviously we have diamonds. But my thought was like having the non-nut draw makes this kind of shaky because we might not even like love a diamond on the river. And if we get jammed on, obviously like king, queen, jacks or fives, kind of a horrible spot to be in. So with his size, I think if he went smaller, I might think of a raise
Yeah, I
here.
agree with
But
you. Yeah.
when he pots it, I figure I just kind of what you said. He's polarizing a bit. Just kind of let him keep bluffing. We have an excellent hand to bluff catch, depending on the river. It just seemed like if I raise here, it feels like I've got to dodge half the deck. So I just play a call.
Yeah, and the other thing too is Michael G says Jack can play this way. I mean, if Under the Gun had Jack, you look at this and it's like, well, he's got most of the top pair sort of covered across the board, but you're so wide out of the big blind heads up that I think that he still can bet a fair amount more than maybe a different configuration just because you have so many hands that might make like pair plus straight draws because you're V-pipping much, much wider here than you are pretty much anywhere else, like at the table. So if I was Under the Gun, I might do more betting with those types of hands, like maybe in a different than versus like in a different configuration.
Right. So we play the call, 300 going to the river, and we get the three of spades. So all the flush draws brick out.
So the final board is Jack of Diamonds, 10 of Hearts, 5 of Diamonds, 9 of Hearts. River is the 3 of Spades. Again, Hero has 10-9 of Diamonds, which was pair plus flush draw that he check called, then turned sort of bottom to middle to, check called again, and now the river's a 3.
Correct.
Yep, a brick 3. I assume you check again.
Check again. I figured there's enough. It seemed like there could be enough bluffs for him to go for it, given this run out. So I check, and he goes 500. So a pretty big overbet.
So UTG bets 500. So I think that we can probably all agree that this is not an overpair, right? Queens, kings, aces, something like that.
I think so. I mean, certain guys, maybe to me, turning like queens or kings into a bluff here doesn't seem that crazy. I guess double blocking the nuts with those hands. I guess you might want like the black combos of those.
I don't know if is this a value bet or turning that into a bluff?
On this kind of board, my hand's so under repped, so it's a good question.
I would think that this would be more of a value bet with an overpair if you thought that you were going to like call down with a jack, right? In a given situation. But you can look at this one a number of different ways, right? You look at pot odds. Obviously, the pot's 800. It's 500 for you to call. He's making an overbet, and then you can look at this from an MDF perspective, which is minimum defense frequency. And this guy's betting almost twice the size of the pot, which means that his bluff, has to get through just under, say, like 66% of the time. I mean, you really only need to defend with maybe 35 to 40% of the hands that you arrive with if you look at this from an MDF perspective, because he is betting over the size of the pot. With that being said, though, we just talked about how you probably are raising some thicker value hands off, I think, on the turn. So besides having like Jack 10 here, and maybe once in a while if you decided to just like you were going to play like 5-5, maybe sometimes as a check raise on the turn and then just decided to call, I would think that 9-10 sort of fits into that type of range. The other thing too is that you block some of the thick sets that might take this type of sizing, because it wouldn't make a ton of sense, I don't think, to take this type of line with Jack for the guy when he blocks like all of the top pairs. So really you get away with under the gun, like starting to make these types of sizings with like 10-10, or if he turns like 9-9, of course you block those. So I think as played, I can't imagine, I don't think I'm folding here if I played it this way when you get this type of run out,
Yeah, but it boiled down. I mean, I think with this line, it's king queen or nothing, right? And there's 16 combos of king queen if we give him all the offsuits. And I figured, give this guy all the remaining suited aces of the heart and diamonds, and then maybe there's just a couple weird combos in there. But I just think that there was enough potential heart and diamond bluffs that he might blast here if I think it's king queen or nothing. And I started thinking out loud. I was kind of talking it out loud, and he was kind of like side eyeing me a bit. And I took it as a little bit of nervousness because I was kind of like, he's right next to me to my direct left, right? Because I was big button under the gun. So it took me a little bit, but given the price that we could put the call in, which seemed reasonable.
So hero calls, and what was the result?
He flips over a6 of diamonds.
Ace of diamonds, 6 of diamonds for the busted front door flush draw. It's interesting, again, we take a look at how this particular configuration where the big blind might be 2 or 3 times as wide as maybe like a flat call in position because you're closing the action and getting a price. Usually you wouldn't think that ace 6 of diamonds would take this for 3 streets on the front door side, especially with that sticky turn card. The only thing that I'll say though is because you have such a sort of chunk of hands that might have a lot of like top pair plus straight draw holdings on the turn, that this might be one of these where it's not that bad, where it might be bad in a different configuration. I'm talking about going 3 streets on the front door side with diamonds, because you arrive on the river with more hands that you might fold defending in the big blind versus some other configuration. It still seems a little bit spewy to me, though.
I think so. I mean, I think like the backdoor heart combo might be a little better for him to bluff
Sure.
with here.
Sure.
For sure.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
I mean, it worked out. Nice little pot. So
I mean, because like, say for example, the turn is instead of a 9, right? Say the turn's an 8. So you obviously have pair plus flush draw, and then you turn open ended. So you're definitely sticking around. I mean, you were going to be sticking around anyways, right? But say that you played that as a check call on the turn. Now on the river, it's a 3, and you check, and he makes the same bet. I mean, what would you think there? If it was Jack 10, 5, 8, 3.
with an 8, yeah, I mean a little stickier there because I mean I think blocking 2 sets is fairly important here. I don't know. I think thinking through it, I mean with the combo work still, I think we could find enough bluffs there to make the call. It'd be, I think, obviously tougher not having, thicker value with 2 pair or not having 2 pair, right? I think I might find the call. It'd be tough, but
see, on Jack 10, 5, 8, he might be allowed to go much, much thinner with overpair. So I'm not saying necessarily with this, he, like I said, he starts to polarize, but I could see some good players going fairly thin on an 8. So I would be much less likely to call there with 9-10 on Jack 10, 5, 8, 3, as opposed to Jack 10, 5, 9, 3, right?
Right.
Where he really is polarizing here. Yeah, on the 9. But interesting. I mean, I would have played it the same way. Nice call.
Thanks, Bart. Appreciate it,
All
man.
right. Thank you, Lincoln.